I mean, I guess
Okay, it says 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Oh, look at that.
Oh, that's what it is.
Okay.
That's where you go.
Okay, welcome to our work meeting for Wednesday, August 23rd. Feels like we were just here. Get right going, we got a big agenda. Item 1.1, review of this evening's agenda. Any changes, comments? Okay, future agenda items. Moving right along. Okay, council discussion of future citizen legislation. Whitison, I'll ask you, Brooke, Holly.
Yeah, Holly.
She's a Herriman resident, correct?
Yeah.
So she's a UFA.
She's actually with St. Mark's.
Oh, she was.
Yeah.
But she was former UFA, right?
Well, she's works for the hospital networks, and she was with St. Mark's most recently. But she's worked for Jordan Valley, and she's the EMS liaison. So she's the one that would interface with all the departments, but she specifically with UFA for best practices and code reviews or cath lab reviews and all of that stuff. But she was a big part of our organization for sure, but a lot of other organizations in the valley as well.
Okay, maybe I'll talk to her, maybe see what we can do to recognize her.
Yeah.
Saturday.
Oh, really?
They are doing a
So,
ceremony.
The funeral's Friday, or Saturday morning, here on Pioneer Street.
It's not actually, they're not actually doing a funeral, they're doing what would you call it, with?
Celebration of Life?
Celebration of
Yeah,
life.
that sounds right.
They're going to do the actual burial later, is our understanding.
Okay. So are we helping with that? I was gonna ask if we could help with anything.
Yeah, I can forward you some information from our information outreach folks and see.
So it's actually my stake center, just down 6,000, right? They're doing it at the
I'm not sure of the
church
location
down
on
in the
her.
cemetery.
I can send it to you.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's condolences to her family. Okay, anything, any other future? Okay, let's jump into 2.1 then, feasibility study and market survey. for
Hold on a
this.
second.
I think we have it as a PDF, we're trying to get it up as a PowerPoint, so it looks.
And this laptop, I can't do anything. So where is it, Justin? Hold on. Okay, Destiny. So it should be that 1 second from the bottom. Okay, as you all know, we have been doing a feasibility study for the approximately 48 acres of open space that's located off of the future 6400 west and about 120th south. We've been working with Victus advisors for the past, 6,
This
7
conference will now be recorded.
6-7 months, and they've completed their feasibility study, and Walter is here this evening to present their findings.
Yeah. Do you want me to
Turn it over to him?
should I
Sure.
sit here or I guess or what's easier
Up
for
there by Jackie.
up there?
There's the
Okay.
clicker.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just right here?
Yeah, that's
Okay, perfect. So Walter Franco with Victus Advisors. I also happen to be a Herriman resident too. So this is the first time I actually get to do a present. We do these around the country, so it's the first time that it's actually here at home. And so we were engaged last year by the city to look at the feasibility of what then was called or known as a working title as the Herriman Athletic Complex. And really the goal was to identify, what market demand there is for an outdoor sports complex that could benefit local usage for Herriman residents and also South Jordan and just kind of the growing southwest corridor of Salt Lake County. And also, what would the economic impact be from bringing in tournaments from regional, national tournaments that would bring people in from outside of Herriman and outside of Salt Lake County. We worked also with Think Architecture to develop potential concepts and renderings based on our recommendations after our market research. So this just kind of shows kind of an overview of what our process was. As I mentioned, we do these types of feasibility studies throughout the country, and we really focus on getting as much data as possible from primary and secondary sources so that our clients, which are typically cities or counties or other public entities, so that they can make an informed decision based on data and the information that we're able to gather. So as you can see here, as part of our research process, we spoke with stakeholders, with local sports groups, and also regional sports groups and event organizers to get an understanding of what the interest would be in using facility if it were built here, specifically in Herriman. We also looked at demographic trends, how Herriman has been growing pretty significantly, exponentially even, and also just the southwest corridor in general, and what opportunities are what's not being met by local groups and what demand is for other groups. With that information, we were able to make recommendations, and that's where we worked again with Think Architecture and construction control as well, to develop concept renderings and estimated costs based on those recommendations, what the operating model could look like, potential partnerships, and what the economic impact would be. And so today we're presenting essentially a brief summary of what we found, and most importantly, what the economic impact would be to the community in Salt Lake County if this facility were to be developed. We spoke with well over 20 groups, local and regional, national groups, to get an understanding again of what the interest level would be in using this complex, the number of fields that they need to meet their demand, what their usage would look like. So you can see here we differentiated between practices, games, and events. Events are sports tourism events, and the number of annual events that they could host. And so at minimum, you're looking at just around 24 annual events that could be hosted at this facility if it were developed. The majority of the groups would use a facility if it were built. The lone exception was the Utah High School Activity Association. They were really looking for essentially a stadium with at minimum, I think, 5,000 to 10,000 seats. So they want to host state championships, but that would just be once or twice a year. But these other groups here, as you can see with Utah Ultimate Disc Association, for example, you had Real Salt Lake. These are groups that would like to use the facility on multiple times per year for various events and tournament activity. Part of our research also was identifying Herriman as a sports tourism destination. So we had identified, we did a SWOT analysis, and essentially the strengths has more related now to local usage. So the younger population, Herriman has been growing exponentially, and high levels of household income. So those things stand to give a good base and foundation for local sports groups to use the facility and to afford the facility. And those typically are the groups that are looking to host tournaments as well. So one of the common feedback that we get from, this is really just nationwide for groups that are traveling to other locations, is the need that they always want to have home tournaments. They want to be able to have the capacity and the ability to host tournaments in their hometown. So a lot of the groups here in Herriman and locally want to have that opportunity and just need the facility. So with that, the weaknesses in this area that we've identified is the lack of a multi-field rectangular sports complex. The majority of the fields, so you have Butterfield Park and just others that are kind of just sparse throughout the community, and then you have a few high schools, but they're limited. They have limited access as well. Also, from a tourism standpoint, in order to really capture economic impact for a community, you want to have hotels in the community, and so there are none right now currently in Herriman. We understand that there are plans for future development, and so that will help as well. But typically, for a sports tourism facility, you like to have a certain amount of hotels within a 5 to 10 minute drive of a sports complex to be able to really capture.
What does that mean? A certain amount?
So it really depends on the population size, but typically you're looking at anywhere between 5 to 10. So some community, like larger markets, you're looking at 10 to 15 or more. Smaller communities, it can be up to 5.
So where would we have to be not to have it as a weakness?
Well, I mean, at least you're gonna wanna have here in Herriman, we did dove a little bit deeper in that in our full report, but at least you wanna have around 5 in the future, but I think that's kind of where Herriman in general is trending with the population growth. And so, and the thing too is, we try to destroy this myth of if you build it, they will come, and so the thing that Herriman really is a strength is that growth has been happening organically or with many different, not just on the residential side, but commercial side as well. And so that builds wealth and incentivizes sports tourism facility development as well. Because you're not building the facility and hoping everything else happens. Other things have already been happening, and so adding the sports tourism facility is kind of almost a cherry on top and helps to strengthen the appeal of a community, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The one threat to kind of keep in mind is, and this is kind of where how Herriman perceives this project, if it's, you know, just a Herriman city project or if it's at a larger scale with Salt Lake County, which there have been discussions about a potential partnership there, is that you can see some economic impact leakage, and that's typically if you have maybe just one hotel in Herriman, but that you have 10 or 15 in South Jordan, so everyone stays there, right? So that's something that's worth considering depending on, you know, ultimately how the city decides to move forward with this project. As part of our interviews with these groups, we were able to develop these demand charts that kind of show what the usage peaks would be throughout the year. So as you can see here, these are color coded. So we do this on purpose, not only for the client, but also for me because I'm colorblind. So it helps to kind of differentiate, you know, what's going on here with the bars. But obviously the largest interest or demand for fields is soccer groups, which again, generally speaking, nationwide, that's always the case. So, but the peak usage would be between the early to late spring and late summer to early fall. Typically in the summer months, it's really hot, and then, you know, some groups are starting to do indoor usage as well. But generally speaking, from a local standpoint, it would have pretty consistent usage during those months. That said, for tournament usage, you would see kind of a peak between April and September based on the interviews that we had, and it's pretty diverse. As you can see, soccer, rugby groups, lacrosse, and then the other events like Ultimate Disc. So there's a lot of diversity, which is good. You don't want to have a facility that just caters to one specific sport because that can kind of ebb and flow in different ways. But if you have multi-use fields and you have that diversity, then you're able to kind of really capture a lot of new and emerging sports. So one sport, for example, that has kind of gotten popular over the years is Quidditch. So a lot of you actually have collegiate teams, you have youth groups as well, and so it's actually you have national and regional youth Quidditch groups, tournaments. So that could be, for example, an event that's hosted here in the future.
Become the Quidditch
It is on ESPN.
Yeah, that's true. If it's on ESPN, you know it's legit, or it's famous, right? So
Yojo University.
Harry Potter name.
So based on our findings in our initial meetings with the city and with Think Architecture, this was the complete, fully phased out 22 field complex that was recommended based on our research. This is what I know that one of the challenges with the current lot is just kind of the size, but this is what we kind of wanted to present as kind of a potential scenario. If everything went with land acquisition and making sure that one of the key things here with land space isn't just the fields, but it's parking. Parking is always a huge issue for these types of tournaments. Some communities, try to mitigate this by having shuttles going from different locations, and sometimes that works. But ultimately, parents, for these types of tournaments, they're driving in minivans. They want to be in and out, and they don't want to have to have this like a super huge convention. So we're working with Think. We've worked with them for many years now, and this is what they were able to create. These are some kind of just rough renderings, high res renderings of what this facility could look like, or the complex.
And this is just with our current land, not with any.
No, that's all of it.
This is South Jordan coming in as well. Okay.
Yeah, the phase one would be Herriman's property.
Okay.
Right. You can kind of
The
see,
first half there,
yeah.
First, it splits that
I know it's kind of a little
field
blurry,
into a
but
parking
yeah.
lot.
Okay.
That's the property we have, we would have to acquire or do other things to get
Right.
Okay.
So again, those are some concepts. You'll notice too the lighting. So we, in working with architecture firms and working with Think, something that's really been a concern with sports facility development in neighborhoods has been just having the lights on very late and how it goes in the neighborhoods. But lighting has actually improved now, where you have specific lighting fixtures that keep the light within the facility. So so I don't know if you can kind of tell with that. I know the screen's kind of bright, but they've taken that into account as well. And that's a must, having lights at the facility. So some facilities have been built without lights, but you want to maximize usage year round as much as possible. And so that's why we always recommend lights. So now at full build out in working with cost construction control, it would be just under 45 million. However, it's very likely that tomorrow this number could change, or in a week. So we know what's been happening nationwide and specifically in Utah, but this is essentially an estimate based on the information we had at the time, or the information that construction control had at the time. And so this can change. There's other factors as well in terms of number of turf fields down the road, different lighting systems, other amenities. So if you include concession stands, how nice they are. If there are playground structures, we've seen some facilities that will also create or develop splash pads, which have become popular. So that way, if you have younger siblings there and, they need to go stretch out or do something else, they can go there or have, slides and stuff like that. So this is, again, what it would be at full build out.
Are those aren't cumulative numbers? That's
that's
the-
by
No,
phase.
yeah. So phase 3 is, if you can see, sorry, I guess this bar here in the bottom is showing,
35,
yeah.
40.
Yeah. So the initial harder cost would be phase 1, because that's where the infrastructure putting in place, and it essentially gets cheaper as you go, but it would be, at full build out, that's what the price would be estimated at right now. In terms, again, in speaking with the city, we looked at this now as a, how this would affect the impact at the Salt Lake County level, and in terms of overall visitation, you'd be looking at somewhere in the range of 800,000. So that includes out of county visitation, but also in county visitation. From weekday, any out of county essentially is just groups coming out from out of Salt Lake County, and just based on this location, realistically, it's probably going to be Utah County, people from Lehigh, Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs. For weekends, however, that's where you would get the bulk of visitation. So about 30, for total visitors, about 37% of annual visitors would be from outside of Salt Lake County, but a pretty hefty for weekend tournaments would be from outside of the county. For soccer tournaments, you're getting a lot of people travel to Utah from Las Vegas, from Boise, from Denver as well, and other groups, especially lacrosse, which tends to have more affluent families and backgrounds. Those are groups that would tend to fly in from other communities as well. From the actual economic impact standpoint, specifically with direct net spending, this facility at full build out would generate, we estimated just over 26 million on an annual basis for Salt Lake County. And that's the gross direct spending, that's with groups locally here as well, but when you take out displacement and our metrics, it ends up being about 26 million, a little over 26 million for net direct spending in the county. Right now, food and beverage, and this is typical with most of our studies that we do, food and beverage and lodging are typically either flipped one way or the other, but in this case, food and beverage would stand to benefit the most, that industry, from economic impact, followed by lodging, and then shopping. And again, this is how we calculate, how it's broken down, that 26.1 million, how it's broken down by industry. And the sports is really from rentals of the facility or team registrations, things like that. From a tax revenue standpoint, as you can see here, the Salt Lake County room tax would benefit the most, same with the restaurant tax, and you're looking at just under $650,000 on an annual basis. Some communities, seeing what the revenues can be, will decide, okay, based on this, what the incremental revenue could be if we increase the taxes by this percentage. That could help fund some of the facilities. So not necessarily suggesting that for this project, but just as a reference point of how communities will look at these tax revenues and say, okay, this is what the benefit could be to the community. So what wiggle room would we have in the future? In terms of annual incremental room nights, we're looking at just under 50,000 incremental room nights on an annual basis. This is assuming the incremental spending would be about 6.3 million, assuming the average daily rate is around $128, which is at the time of this study was the average daily rate in Salt Lake County. Typically with these types of events, when you're talking about youth and amateur sports tourism, families that are traveling in minivans or flying in, they're going to be staying at your Fairfield Inn, Spring Hill Suites. And so those are the types of hotels that sports tourism groups or commissions really want to see built close or in the vicinity of these sports complexes, because those are the ones that are going to offer free breakfast. They have the pools, either indoor or outdoor, and they're family friendly. And at full build out, again, over a 30-year period, the net present value for economic impact would be about $442 million, and generating tourism taxes of overall taxes would be well over $17.5 million over a 30-year period. And then just the last thing here that we wanted to mention with economic impact, and speaking again with the city, they wanted to kind of put a scenario of what if this facility combined forces with the regional athletic complex in Salt Lake. That essentially gives you power to have a mega tournament or event, and we assume that a national soccer tournament and others that we've profiled before in the past would be about 500 teams, over 20 players and spectators per team, which would equate to about 30,000 total visitors, with 95% of those originating from outside of Salt Lake County. And that's typically for a 3-day tournament of play. Usually in Utah, that might be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. In other communities, it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So with that in mind, a lot of that spending flips a little bit from what you've seen on the previous chart that we gave, where a lot of that is through registration fees and a lot of lodging, because for those mega tournaments, you're getting a lot of people flying in or driving in from various communities. In this case, for Utah, you're going to get a lot of travel from California, from Idaho, Colorado, and Arizona and Nevada as well. Again, this is just for one tournament alone, hypothetically speaking, so that represents just under 20% of what you would see from an annual standpoint for this facility here in Herriman from this mega soccer tournament. And then from an annual incremental nights, you're looking at just under 15,000 hotel nights for a tournament of this size, because you'd be using 38 fields, almost 40 fields in Salt Lake County. So that's kind of a quick, I know I kind of zoomed past it, but I know my time was limited. With that being said, are there any questions with what we've presented so far?
Any questions or comments? Just a few high-level points, right? Most of you know I'm super passionate about this and other things, but there's a huge need for it. I mean, so many of us leave the community and drive forever to find, we don't have fields, let alone fields that are concentrated in place. The ones we have aren't sufficient. I'll say this the wrong way. Twice a week I drive pick up 2 nephews, one in Herriman, one in Bluffdale, to go to practice in Sandy. I drive by a big 30-acre regional park in Bluffdale on 2700 and see all of this empty, wasted space. Right? It looks great, it's a great park, but we need more of these things. In the study, if you look through the information, and the mayor and I have been on the committee looking through this, just the just the local use, we'll use it 100% of the time, keep it full and busy. That's like how much, and that's just the first phase, the first 14 fields, just local teams practicing regular games, no tournaments, keeps that busy all year long. And that includes, so I don't know if you covered this before I came in, but we're talking artificial turf that can be used year round, and it will get used year round. Teams I coach would play in the winter. Colorado comes here twice, we go there twice. New Mexico, the same thing. December, January, and February outside on turf fields, right? And the other sports you mentioned are the same. So it's a huge need, huge economic impact for the city. What we want to do. I mentioned last night, we're the cul-de-sac. We're not on the way anywhere. We need things like this to bring people here, spend money, food, drinks, etc., even if it's just the local stuff, and then go home to get their services, right? So it's this, and we're talking about trails and other recreation opportunities to do that same thing. But I have to make one comment on that last slide. I know the county asked for that, the combined tournaments with the RAC. You know, they need to understand that's not realistic. And I know that they're looking at, we're likely going to have the first phase for sure. I think most of us think we're 90% of the way there, the first 6 fields or so. I think South Jordan and Rio Tinto are good with the second phase for the 14. It's the next 8. And I think this is just me, I think they're asking for that because they're not, it's less likely that we'll get that. We're a long ways away from that final 8 commitment.
Right.
But the national tournaments, the things that actually bring in the big money, they're not coming unless there's 20 fields together. 45-minute drive between here and the RAC in Rose Park. No
They're not gonna do
no
that.
big tournaments. You might find 1 or 2, like maybe, but talking with these organizations, big national soccer organizations, we just spent a week national playoffs in Greensboro, North Carolina. Every day we drove 30 minutes from the hotel to the field because we had to, but they have all the fields right there. There are 20-some fields. That's why we go there. So I know that they asked for that, but we need to be honest with them and they need to be realistic that if it needs to be on there to sell it, great, to fund it, but it's not very likely. It's more likely to partner with RSL only a few minutes away and leverage that, but they still want 20 fields in one place to do those big things. But super excited about this. This is the Herriman brainchild that we've taken to the county in South Jordan and looking for partnerships and creative ways to fund these things and bring in some so.
So next steps, just so y'all are aware, next year ZAP is going to be back on the ballot for renewal, and that will determine whether we get funding for these types of projects countywide. And that's why we started working on this feasibility study now, so we can be ready and prepared when those applications come due. Next month, staff are meeting with Salt Lake County staff. They're redoing their master plan to put this project in their master plan. So we'll be meeting with them, I think it's September, second or third week of September. Because it has to be a component of their master plan to be funded by staff. So we're taking all these little baby steps to get hopefully to where we wanna be, to at least get phase 1 done and paid for with staff. So politically, you know who to talk to.
And your meetings are this, so next month?
Yes, next month.
In my lunch with Mayor Wilson, she's very supportive of this. So,
Keep talking about it, keep reminding them.
this is one of those projects we need to lead out on and talk, and
Yeah.
we need to talk like
And
it's
even
going
our-
to happen.
even our
Getting the
neighbors,
right
right?
people to talk
Yep.
over a
Talking to
period
our
of time.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you,
Mayor,
Walter.
thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Okay, 2.2. Update and discussion regarding private and published fiber utility partner.
All right. We have talked about this a lot of time, and in March this year, we selected Strata to help us put together initially a high-level design. So they're partway through that. This is really an update, and they have a presentation, I think a brief presentation, and then the ability to answer questions for council. a lot of the information was in your staff report, so you had a chance to read that, and I don't want us to take too much time setting them up, so I don't know who from Strata is
Bart's
giving
gonna take the
the.
lead.
Yes, I'll be giving the presentation, but I have Tyler Rasmussen with me, who most of you I think are familiar with. Dave Ryan was slotted to be here with us, but he had a family emergency come up and was unable to attend with us, so.
So are you with Bart or is Bart with you? I'm just
Good
wondering
question.
how this is.
Yeah, I'm with Bart.
Okay.
I would strongly disagree. Okay, green button for this one? Okay,
The
great.
arrows one.
So just to key off from what Nathan said, that we've been working on this high level design since March and really getting into the weeds of it since May of this year, and we are most of the way through that high level design, and we've been tasked to kind of give you a status update, and feel free to ask questions if you have any. Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about kind of what this preliminary design may look like. So Herriman City is approximately 20,000 locations. What that means for a network perspective is that we'll probably split this into about 3 different zones where electronics will be housed. And along that, we will have a robust fiber backbone that will be able to provide critical services to critical locations, and maybe this new sports complex may be one of those new critical facilities. We need to make sure that ESPN can televise the Quidditch tournaments, right?
Cameras on every field.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways, so this is just a really like a 10,000 foot view of what this may look like. Inside of this, there will be sub-serving areas, but somewhere between 30 and 40 of those. Along with this, we like to make sure that we're planning for the future, and we have accounted for that. And all this future data that you can see here is an interpolation of the Herriman City water system master plan and future land use map. So in conjunction with that data, along with all of the data that we've gathered throughout the high level design, we can project what your future will look like in 10 years and make sure that what we are looking at designing for you can handle that. As far as the timeline is concerned, like we've already stated, we've been working on this since March, officially starting May with the high level design and the scoping exercises. We will probably be wrapping that up this August, September, October. The timeline, if we were to move forward, you guys look at everything that we've presented and say, yes, this looks great to us. We're looking at approximately starting as early as December of this year. Obviously, a lot of this will be hinging on your analysis, getting bonding and funding, et cetera, and then moving all the way into 2027 to finish up all the construction. Kind of a micro view of this, within, like I said earlier, within each of these 3 main zones, there's going to be several different smaller serving areas, and each one of those will take between 3.5 to 5 months to complete, starting with mainline construction and then placing and splicing fiber and making sure that everybody can get turned on and turned up to the services. So what does that look like as far as impact to your residents? It's slightly different than what you may think of as far as a normal utility like water or sewer, where you would terminate in the road and then that's kind of the end of the city's involvement. With fiber, it's different. The termination point will actually be at the premise, at the home. And so we would take services to the home, and that demarcation point would be located on the home. Basically a small electronic receiver that receives light from the fiber and translates it into usable data for the resident who is applying for the service. So after all of this, we've gathered lots and lots of data, and you guys have been very, very helpful. We've put together several different scenarios that are that are very high level, and we are still refining this. At the request of the city, we looked at two specific construction methodologies. Both construction methodologies that have been looked at are the lowest impact for your residents. This first one, directional boring, these are the numbers for that. This one, we're assuming that we would do 90% of that project directional boring, with 10% of it being micro trenching or other placement methodologies. The two presented models that you can see, the difference between the two is the interest rate. On the left, you can see that it's a 5% interest rate on your bond. On the right, you can see an 8% interest rate. The other difference you can see is in the retail rates. Those have been adjusted to make sure that ultimately your bottom line, your take rate is manageable and achievable. So you can see the difference there on the left. You can see you would need a 47% take rate to break even with your bond payments, and on the right a 65% take rate, assuming that there's an 8% interest. This other cost model we put together is just flip-flopped, wherein micro trenching is the primary construction methodology, and directional drilling and or other construction placement methods are supplemented. As with most construction projects, one of the few variables that we can adjust to see what it does to the cost is the construction methodology, which roughly will be about 2/3 of your total project cost. And you can see the differences here. Once again, you can see the different interest rates between the two, and the different retail rates and their associated minimum take rates to make the monthly bond payment. You'll notice that on a micro trenching project, those thresholds are lower.
Bart, do you mind if I just clarify?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that okay? So that percentage you're seeing at the bottom of these business models, the 24% is referencing your actual subscription requirement. The assumption in this model, if you look at those boxes kind of right through the middle, is that there would be a residential and business utility fee that would be assessed to all locations in the city. Is the modeling that we were asked to provide. And again, at $15 or $30 for residential or business at every location, what we're saying there at the column on the bottom left is that you still need 24% of those locations to subscribe to the internet service as it's delivered, right? Just to clarify.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tyler.
So you're at 289, and to make up the difference to the 352, you have to have
Yep.
24%.
You have to have actual subscription revenue.
Correct. And
Does the utility fee come with a base package, or they still have to have an ISP
Um,
for a base minimum?
Yeah, that's a great question. It could. We've deployed models that way. Yeah, I think that's,
Or the $15 gets them a couple megs?
That's what we discussed.
I think that's what we
previously,
wanted,
like,
yeah.
You know, you get
yeah, it
enough to
definitely
get
could.
an email or something.
Yeah,
like
just
that.
basic service, yeah.
just enough to check your email and do very,
Yeah.
very
Basic
basic
web browsing.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
correct.
Stuff you get in the hotel before you pay that $5.
Yeah, yeah, the free Wi-Fi. on the
Five's pretty
airplane.
cheap,
Yeah.
huh? Okay, any other questions?
One other important point is the retail rates that you see there suggested at 75 for 1 gig and 65 for 250 meg are what we would deem to be kind of middle of the road in current open access markets. We have participating ISPs that are sub 70 and sub 60 for those same packages as well. So again, we're kind of trying to be conservative with this modeling. I think you potentially in an open access environment could have some partners come in at 70 or 60 for those same packages, right?
Then your take rate would just have to be higher to make that difference?
Well,
or
no, because that's actually revenue that your ISP partners are willing to give up, you know, and we probably should have included a slide to illustrate the revenue distribution, right? But that wouldn't impact the city's portion of the revenue, right? You're gonna have basically a wholesale fee that will be collected, you know, $52 or $57-ish.
$56.
And then your ISP partners are gonna compete. They're gonna basically market at a certain rate. And again, the open access component of this drives that competition and drives pricing parity. So you'll have probably several providers that'll be pretty close, but But in other open access markets, we're seeing those prices anywhere from like $69 to 76 or 77 for a gig. So again, we're trying to be conservative with what we're modeling. And again, that would not impact the revenues that the city would collect. Other than it would potentially drive up subscription if those rates are lower, right, the end retail rate.
Yeah.
And so it would generate more revenue
Yeah,
for you
lots
as a
more,
city.
Great, thanks Tyler. As far as our construction methodology, I just have a couple of slides to kind of give you a sense of what microtrenching is and what directional boring looks like, and the different impacts that are associated there. Microtrenching is essentially an 1.5 wide cut by 16 inches deep, up to 16 inches deep, where we lay micro conduits in the bottom of that trench, fill that trench with flowable fill, and then fill that crack with a crack sealer, some sort of mastic. It's very, very low impact to traffic. You can have traffic driving right over the top of this. Here you can see several different pictures that are associated with the different phases of the project. Anytime we make a bend in the corner or we turn, you'll see that there's an 8H core hole. And this represents more or less the whole process of microtrenching. But we really like this option just because it's such a low impact to the residents.
So I have a question on that. Remember when we were going through all the meetings and there were so many issues with this, like so many different cities had subpar finishes and things like that, and we talked about they'd have to make it up to our standards and things like that. What discussion has gone in as far as that goes?
We've got a standard that has been adopted, and Justin and Jonathan have kind of led those discussions with these guys. I think you take that over, Justin, they follow that standard, right?
Alright, you were talking that way, so I apologize. I didn't
Oh, I'm
hear
sorry, I
your
was just
question.
curious about, because when we were going through all the meetings and everything, there was a lot of installation going in with this type of
Yep.
trenching, but it was very subpar. It was barely underground, or those sunk a lot, just, there was a lot of problems
Correct.
with them.
Yeah,
And
so-
so what?
Yeah,
what
so
did
we've
we
worked closely with Strata to develop that, so they've sent us some micro-trenching standards that will be required by the contractor to follow if we go this route. And like he said, Bart said it would be 16 inches depth typically, and then they have about 2 or 3 inches of conduit, depending on how many micro ducts are in each trench. And then the rest of that would be flowable fill up to about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch at the top of asphalt. And then the mastic seal would be placed over the top to seal that trench. So we would watch that closely on the installation.
Okay,
And these standards can be adjusted like we have with you, and I think a lot of the definition of microtrenching is very loose because some companies will microtrench at a depth of like 8 inches,
yeah,
and we can go as deep as 16. But that can be adjusted, right, as per your standards.
The
No,
one
no.
thing we'll have to watch really close is some of our roads, like 6,000 West and ones like that have a lot of cracking that are a little older that need to be repaired. We might have to look at directional drilling that or doing some larger pavement repairs, timing them up with some road work at the same time, just so that we don't have a whole road inside of it.
Correct. Yeah, microtrenching tends to lend itself to better constructed roads. The ones that are more poor construction, you start to see a little bit more issue there, so.
but my question primarily was because financially, I assume that there's a different cost when it's done better, so I just wanted to make sure that was
Correct.
considered in these
Yeah, so,
estimates.
yeah, in these estimates, that's taking into a consideration of a 16-inch trench.
Okay.
I have two main questions on this topic. This is one of them, so piggyback on what Sherry just said. I'm gonna look at Monty. And the picture helps me see that it is microtrenching. If we have standards, that answers part of that question. But my other part is maintenance. I know I hate seeing roads torn up, especially our new roads that have just been put down. And then from a maintenance point of view, if this isn't done properly, and even if it is done properly, it creates some maintenance problems every time there's a road cut. Have we looked at that regarding the standards? Where I'm kinda going with this is there an option to look at a combination of the microtrenching and directional drilling? We're looking at major thoroughfares, highly used roads, right? Would it make more sense to do directional on those roads and with microtrenching?
Yeah, our recommendation is that we find an appropriate mix. There are some parts of town, As we get to the hills, that trenching it in a traditional way is probably not possible. They're blasting to put houses in.
Ditch which is gonna break down.
Yeah.
I promise.
Got a lot of rock in your area, huh?
Yeah.
In that area, it's probably gonna make more sense to stay in that road bed area.
Yeah.
Where it's already been disturbed. So our recommendation right now is if we move forward is that we look for an appropriate mix of these two types.
Evaluate each section of road.
Cause I
No,
get, I get upfront costs, but if we're
Long-term.
talking, right, about long-term maintenance,
Yes.
you can see that easily.
If you wanna see what it looks like, Riverton just installed, with Google Fiber over in, the neighborhoods over
Foothills.
by Monarch Meadows, you know, back in over there. If you drive on any of the streets, you'll see where the trench is and you can see the mastic they put over the top. And it's, you know, the trench is this wide and the mastic they put over the top is about this wide. And, you know, I'm not an engineer or a chemist, but it appears to be a pretty solid seal.
And then there's another seal coat or chip seal
Yeah,
or
it looks-
anything on top of that.
It looks
Yeah.
to be fairly well done.
Yeah.
I mean, I was concerned when I first saw it, I was like, holy
'Cause it's bright
crap,
white
it's like,
from the float
it's
film.
bright white and all this stuff. And
What's
But
the
after they
snowplow
came
gonna
back
think
and-
about that?
After they came back and looked at it, it looks pretty good.
And if you would like to see Strata's process, we are currently working in Lehigh with this process too.
Maybe you
So,
get a field trip, yeah.
Yeah, we would recommend you look at what we're doing instead of what Google Fiber's doing.
Yeah.
It's close, you know?
Lehigh's
I
not too
think,
far.
I think members of, you guys actually went and viewed the micro trenching, and
Yeah, and
I think we've
let's say I
included
think
a
what we're
video,
talking about is
if you would
those
like
type
to
of
see, we have
what
some
they're
good,
doing anyway.
some video
Right.
material that you could view as well. If you would like to see more of what micro trenching looks like as far as Strata standard, you can do that. Yeah, great questions. Anything else before I move on?
And these are deep enough, you can do a traditional mill and open them.
Yeah, that's the whole point of getting
Yeah.
them down to a certain
Yeah,
depth,
8
right, is so
inches
that,
is just like,
Sometimes you're still in the pavement section.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah.
even into the dirt,
Those
yeah.
are 12, 14 inches.
right, exactly. Okay. Directional boring is a very, another option that's low impact. It's not as low impact as some people think because you still need an open and a closed pit to shoot that directional boring, or the directional drill. But ultimately, it's a trenchless method where you have this machine that's set up and it has a GPS guided, it looks kind of like a duck bill and you can point it in just the right direction that you'd like to be. But there is an open and a closed pit, and there's often more time associated with this type of construction methodology, and it's more expensive than micro trenching, but it's another great low impact option.
Are you guys doing boring all your laterals to the homes, or are you using existing?
So our typical method, if we are doing micro trenching, is we will micro trench across the road, and then to get under the sidewalk, we usually do some sort of like a whole hog. It's a pneumatic whole hog that'll get up and under the sidewalk to place to an access point, and then we'll take from there, go to the home.
And are you micro trenching in their dirt, in their grass, or you bore into them?
No, anytime we're outside of like asphalt, we're gonna be doing other construction
Okay,
methods. And on roads where you've got a really good open shoulder, like we'll absolutely entertain other
Get
much
into the
cheaper.
dirt rather than the
Yeah,
asphalt?
rather than going in the asphalt. I think you guys have stated it well that I think a hybrid is probably your best option.
It's almost like a farm tool that like just
Yeah,
plows
drags
through
it
the
through,
ground and lays the kind of underneath there, yeah.
Yep, we call it a plow, so, yep,
They
very
were
good.
just doing it on 111 down by the dump the other week.
Okay, and then you can see here, there's, to end with, I just wanna show a couple pictures of what the facilities may actually look like. You can see this green box. You'll see those along with, like, access points, handholds, or vaults, and they will be placed at strategic locations as little as we can to not create eyesores for your residents and also, to be more economic. Like you can see some of these in here as well, pictured. And then the last thing here is this, and this is kind of a bit awkwardly placed, but this is what the shelters could look like, and we're very flexible with these. Ultimately, we have to have a certain number of these to house all the electronics, and they're a larger building, but
HOAs, private roads, how's that work?
So that would need to be some sort of a communication between the city and whatever entity is in charge of that road. We have, sometimes cities will elect to just not go in there. And sometimes they'll come to some sort of arrangement where they're allowed to be in the PUE or microtrench down the road. It just depends, but it would have to be some sort of agreement between the city
Yeah,
and that entity.
We discussed that when we were having the committee meetings, even about approaching the HOAs, and if they're under contract currently with their current provider, if they are interested in either finalizing that
Access,
contract
yeah.
and then moving this way, but we would want to reach out to those individual HOAs and just let them know what's coming and see if they're interested in moving this direction with the city, or if they want, especially once their contract ends with their current providers.
We've sent out in conjunction with Herriman City, we've sent out a survey to these different HOAs. We've had very little reception or feedback from
Yeah,
it.
usually just the management or the board, they're not ready.
Yeah, not very responsive, but we've had a couple of responses, but in other cities where we've approached these HOAs, most of them have been very excited because with an open access network, you're only placing one set of facilities and allowing however many ISPs you want in, rather than having 15 different facilities for all 15 different providers.
Yeah.
So most of them are usually pretty excited about it.
There was a map in the staff report that showed kind of anticipated locations for
Of the
these.
huts,
These,
Well, what might also help, with timing and construction costs is if an HOA area already has fiber installed, there may be some negotiations on, purchasing or utilizing that, already existing network materials that we can, enhance and upgrade with what we need to make it work, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
Minor note too, we're building these fiber shelters, we're manufacturing these ourselves, so we can customize them any way you'd like. As far as exterior finish and design, placing them in your parks and I'm sure Bart's gone through that process with your staff in terms of identifying those locations, so.
75%
Keep that in mind, we can.
Michael?
Bart's a pretty good artist, he could
Yeah,
maybe even.
There's some tape and paint, makes it look like stone real quick, yeah.
Some overlay.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have for you guys. Do you have any other questions that we can help with?
I'm assuming down the road more the finances, right?
Yeah, this is, so.
This is just an update where we're at, right?
No
Yes,
questions, just some
Another big
comments here.
question.
Yeah, is that, first of all, I think this is awesome, great work, guys, thank you for spending the time and effort and getting this stuff done. I think that the big takeaway from this information is that they're using the model that is proposed in here. There's at least a feasible path forward to make the network happen. I think that the models can be substantially enhanced, with some tweaks and some decisions that we can make on a few things that I think would, really make it better. I'll just leave it at that for right now. And I think that once if we can agree on some of those tweaks and some of those ideas in the model, I think we're ready to move forward and get bonding information right away. So what I would propose is that we have a meeting early next week. Let's talk about some of these model enhancements that I'm proposing. Let's kind of run I know you guys are just popping some numbers and it's pretty easy for you guys. So I don't think that's a very long or complex meeting, but to get some of that stuff and then come back to the council at our next meeting in 2 weeks with those updated numbers and make a decision. I don't want this to be strung out any longer than it needs to be.
Especially if they're anticipating December to start something.
Agree. Are you talking about just tweaking how much micro-trenching versus how much boring?
No,
those kind of things?
it has to do with,
Financial components.
yeah, the financial components and what the wholesale rate is, what the charge rate is, what the utility fee is. All of those numbers being tweaked together, I think there's I think there's a lot more revenue that can be generated to help service the debt, make this a
I
lot,
agree,
lot
I
more
think this
feasible.
was really a good 10,000 foot look at it, but I think what it demonstrated is very feasible, it's very doable. Our take rates are still very low, which we anticipated, but it's better, it's nicer to have it rather than spitball and not say, yeah, it looks.
I think that's what it's saying is that using the least expensive, construction, using very low take rates, high opt-out rates, the
Worst case
the
scenario.
least exciting models, blah, blah, blah. It's still within a realm of feasibility for us to tackle, and that's good news. The enhancement I'm talking about just make it much easier for us to accomplish those things with even more conservative rates, lower hurdles for take, and more revenue for debt service to let us get that paid off faster.
Okay,
So-
cool.
So if you guys are amenable to that, that's what I'd really like to do is get on this ASAP early next week. Let's get these numbers tweaked and come back to the council in 2 weeks with an update and let's get a decision made.
Does that mean work or general?
Is that on the agenda?
No,
You do have an extra week though.
Well,
We
we
have an
have,
extra
with
week.
3 weeks, I guess is what it is, yeah.
we don't as staff, because we have to get it in so early.
That's what I'm saying, they need a time to.
We'll try.
We can do our
We'll do our
best,
best.
but
That's
it
not,
depends on how, it depends on how long it takes you all to come to your stuff. I mean, if we're still, it's not next week, it's the week after, there's no way we're gonna meet that day.
I think we can get through what I'm proposing in less than an hour.
And get the and then Strata will have to get the information.
It's a matter
Right
of when
to them.
they get the information.
I think Strata can update that information in about 40 seconds.
It shouldn't take us too long.
Probably won't be a real in-depth staff report. It'll just
Right, I
be
mean,
back with the-
literally they punch in a couple numbers and it just generates all the stuff, right? It's just a very couple simple tweaks.
Okay, cool.
As soon as possible, great.
Cause all it is coming back,
Look at it when you look at each
it's the same, it's all the same information. All it is just a model to say, we like this model, let's go forward and start getting the bond put in place to see,
This is
go out
what we
and get
talked
those
about,
parameters
this
and
is
stuff
one of the
done.
off ramps or on ramps, and this is the next step of
Yeah.
moving forward, so, yeah,
Okay,
makes sense.
Yeah, go get bond proposals and all that stuff together, and then that'll be kind of our last off ramp, right?
So you're proposing you and I and these guys, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Reach out to us, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you guys are available, we'll be here.
Yeah, it's just,
Justin will work on it.
Justin said.
working on it right now.
I'm doing it right now. Look at him go.
I'm making myself a reminder.
You're talking this way,
In an
I said
email
it.
shell.
Is that what you?
Yeah, he knows.
Probably something to do with it.
It's like me, I can't looking
Teddy, will you pass the clicker down?
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll touch base with you.
Okay.
It'll be fast.
2.3 old city hall discussion.
So,
should know
Practicing your auctioneer voice.
no, this is gonna be fast. You're still gonna get it from last night.
Really?
I knew you knew where I was going.
Yes, I can tell you.
You can tell.
All right, a few weeks ago, Councilman Hodges, Councilman Horn, and the mayor was there for a minute before he had to leave for something else. Went and toured the old building to see maybe what we could do with it. We talked about facility rental and meeting space. We walked around the building. We have about 8 police officers over there and support staff. They're in the back hallway. And then we looked at some ideas of what we could do with this building in the future. I emailed some of this to you guys yesterday. I added a timeline for you in the 4th slide, so we'll use that. This is our proposed ongoing maintenance and operations when we do have programs there. That will not be for a while, just because of funding mechanisms that we're expecting to use to help pay for some of these things. And time to do some demolition and remodeling of the facility itself. So in that footnote, you can see that we can use CDBG funds for 15% of the annual grant allocation, which would be right now about $26,000. So cover program supplies and instructors, any program materials could be covered by that funding as well. These are the estimated construction costs for design, demolition, and remodel for what we talked about during our walk around, wanting to put these numbers together. You can see the total there, just over 500,000. CDBG funding we'll get every year now going forward. The first 3 years, starting July 1 of 2024, we are still part of the urban county, but we are an entitlement community now, so we'll get a bigger share of those funds that we can use towards these types of programs and activities. Remodeling a facility such as this is eligible under the CDBG funding. We also just applied for the EECBG fund, which we'll find out more about in January. And we can continue, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, to apply future years to these costs.
That's my understanding.
So, that 278,000 could potentially be strung out over a few years. Any questions on that slide? The mayor and I met with Salt Lake County earlier this week. They do not have any plans to expand their programming to Herriman, which is fine. I don't think a congregate meal program is gonna be a huge deal here.
Plus it comes with strings usually too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and so I think we could provide some really interesting and different programming for our aging adult population that's different from the other centers that focus more on the older adults rather than the active adults, so. Here's the proposed timeline, and the reason why I wanted to get this in front of you is because I haven't worked with CDBG since South Jordan. I used to help administer the program there. It's gonna be another learning curve for Michael, and I have been working with the county and with HUD on this. And so anticipating all of the things that are coming up in the next year, including with the legislative session, that's going to be pretty heavy, it sounds like. I just wanted to get some direction from you all and kind of where you're leaning on this, whether we want to continue down this path using CDBG money. We talked about opening up the upstairs to make about a 4,100 square foot room that we could rent out and do programs and activities in. That's removing walls. We would leave police there if that's where they desired to be. We'd have to do some hardening of their area if it was going to be open to the public. There's a lot of room downstairs for Friends of Herriman and other programs to come in and do things, but this is gonna be a couple of years of work, right, in programming and coming back to you with budget, during our budget process this fall and spring. And so that's why I'm kind of pushing on it so early, even though it's gonna take us some time.
You're saying construction costs will be stretched out over a period of time as well? We're gonna be asking for all this up front.
No, so let me go through the timeline really quick. So May of 2024, I'm anticipating releasing the RFP for design services for the remodel. You could read it, I don't need to read you the slide, it's there. I think the construction process is gonna take some time. It's not all gonna happen in one budget year. So yes, it would be stretched out over time.
And the HVAC, we received a grant from the federal government, so that will dictate when we have to do that.
Well,
It's,
pretty much automatic, but
Yeah.
we'll find out the process in January.
so we were entitled to the money. We have to go through their process to get it. And HVAC updates are one of their eligible costs, so we just don't know how long that process will take.
Is that something facilities can do, or is that an outsourced?
We would contract
Okay.
that. And one of the things as we get to that point, again, we're talking July 2024, we need to decide if we're gonna do that big open room, that probably changes how they
Yeah, for the
change that
envelope,
HVAC
yeah.
versus the way it's split up.
It's a great space, I mean, relatively inexpensive for the amount of square footage that's there for us to utilize.
And we own it, and the problem is the value, there's no value in it to try and sell it, because who's gonna,
We were contacted by a
Winter.
church that was interested in it, but we have parking issues over there that I don't think.
Sunday.
Yeah, it'll be complicated with the Sunday,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cause that's why that parking works now, is
Yeah.
because typically there's no programming or anything there for Sunday, so we can share that parking, but if it's not, a church, that's gonna be really a nightmare. But other than that, what kind of business is gonna move into that facility? And so then you lose all the value of the building. And you just sell it for the land, and the price of construction costs right now, how could you replace it for the cost it's gonna for the benefit of Braintree community.
And we'll continue to look for more grant opportunities and funding opportunities as we build out the programming. Just trying to get ahead of it, especially with CDBG and federal grants, they are really difficult to deal with and report and all of those things, so I just wanna have,
The one thing is, we talked, like CDGB, we don't have very many options out here.
no, correct.
This is a place we can't put.
Now, in 3 years, we'll be done with our urban county, I need to talk about that too. Our agreement with Salt Lake County in 2027. And I'm hopeful at that point, we could maybe hire somebody just to focus on grant writing. I think that would be really beneficial for us as we continue to grow and continue to get access to these types of funding mechanisms. Because it's a lot for current staff to work on. And then one more thing, HUD came back on Friday, I had a call with HUD and Salt Lake County. They did not agree with some of the language that was presented by the county in the interlocal agreements, so they will be they're asking us to resubmit an interlocal that will be on your September 13th consent agenda. So it's basically tweaking some of the language in the agreement from HUD. And that has to go back to every municipality in the county. So just giving you a heads up on that. So yes, just keep plugging away at this and
This direction is good and stretching it out and finding other funding.
Yeah.
Is the programming part that cringe out a little bit, because the tendency is, well, it's there and let's do more stuff and it costs us more money. We've had those discussions
Yeah.
already, so as we look to those things, they pay for themselves. We'll be happy.
yeah, and I don't anticipate programs being there till 2025. Like I said, some of the CDBG also pay for that. You can also bring in other organizations like AARP comes in and does free courses. Lone Peak Hospital is interested in partnering with us on some educational type classes, so I think there's a lot of other
I think you
things.
said the aging, I know we talked about.
Yeah, they also, Salt Lake County has some programs as well. They're more of a one-time kind of.
I think there's a couple pretty profound holes in services as a community that are missing out here. We had, what's her name, came out and do the presentation about the ESL stuff, right?
Oh yeah, that's another one.
Right, the
Doing
English
mental
classes and the
health.
and the impact that has on, some communities, right, that feel a little disassociated because of language. I think that's a really important aspect for
And
us.
it's a non-government building, it's a government building that's.
Right. We've talked about, for seniors, the activity center in Riverton is great. It's got lots of programming, a lot of things going on, but it's the distance. It's over in Riverton, right? There's nothing here for the local
Yeah.
seniors to do. And it's, I'm not saying we have to provide everything here, but filling some of those holes with some things here locally. And again, public-private partnerships, finding organizations like AARP or hospitals or civic
Kids on
groups or
Wheels, yeah.
teaching organizations or anything that want to come out and help plug some of those holes makes the budget that we have to come up with for some of that stuff a lot smaller. But I think you're on the right track, and I think as we can start piecing that together, we get a better vision of what that needs to be.
Blake, do you have a slide?
Yeah. Okay, 2.4, discussion regarding proposed South Hills Rosecrest PID. Like,
Yeah, there's a couple handouts here. As I was going through the staff report, I realized I should have included a letter of intent along with the governing document. Because if you were reading the PID policy and you were only reading the governing document, you probably noticed there was a lot of missing information. They needed to pull together. So. And then, so the cover sheet that I put on each thing I just handed out is a checklist that basically follows the PID policy. That's what I'm using to evaluate the PIDs as they come in. There's a letter of intent portion that goes to the CD committee, and then once the CD committee feels that the letter of intent meets all the criteria, then it's recommended to go to this body to be discussed in the governing document, prepare interlocal agreement, all the good stuff that goes along with creating public infrastructure district. And then you also have a letter of intent, and on the very back, I put together just a draft tentative schedule to go through all the things that are gonna be part of this PID. There's an amendment to the Wasatch MBA. And then it kind of stands alone a little bit, so it's on a quicker timeline. And then there's an amendment to the Rosecrest MDA and a new MDA that will be created by DAI, or for DAI. And those two items are kind of tied at the hip. They have to go together because there's property shared between those two. And then the PID ties all three of those together in the funding mechanism to complete the infrastructure for those developments. So tonight, I only have the PID on for discussion, but we'll answer any other questions on that other stuff. So the location's generally above Mountain View Corridor, down on the south end of Herriman. And about 1,100 acres is what's being proposed, split into Wasatch and then DAI Rosecrest. 500 acres or so each, 530, 560. The way they're doing it is set up like the Olympia bid. They're proposing to do 6 micro districts. They're like a third acre each, so 2 acres total. And then when they want to activate a PID and go out for and get bonding money, they can activate it and make it whatever size they need to cover that area. And then gives them flexibility so they don't have to, go out and get all $55 million right at once. They can do portions, phase it, make it work. The proposed mill levy is 4.5 mils. So in this letter of intent, the typical $600,000 single-family home would see about $1,485 per year additional to their property tax with that 4.5 mil levy. And then the maximum mill levy term would be 40 years, according to the government document. Each one of those activations for those sub-districts, I was calling them, would be a plat amendment to the final local entity plat. It's prepared to this. And we are getting ready, I think, to probably do one of those for them. So we've never done one yet. We'll find out how hard that is. Any questions on that? I mentioned that was pretty fast. It's similar to what we've already seen before.
It's funny that the water district has to max out at .004 and these can go to 0.05.
15 mils is the
15.
max.
I think they can actually, the state law go
Yeah.
much higher.
It's crazy.
Way up.
15 mils. Our PID policy allows for up to 15, so they're only asking for.
They're doing more than just water too, so.
Chase just wants
That's
to know.
school district tax.
They're doing more. They're doing.
So-
Anyway, sorry.
I'll just make a comment here. So one of the things we've repeatedly talked about with, the PIDs, right, is we sometimes feel like the cart's getting before the horse. We're being asked to approve certain things without understanding what we're approving it for. We're asked to approve agreements without understanding what the land use plan is fully, right? Those kind of things. In this case, I think in previous iterations, previous discussions we've had, that the detail of what the project actually is has been missing, and so there's been this kind of herky-jerky, really reluctance to say anything other than, well, sure, go forward, but we're not gonna prove anything until X, Y, and Z happen, right? So, I had the privilege last week to go with, Jim and Chase and take a tour down there and, drive up through the hills and see where things are. It's really, really cool what they have planned up there. The way that they have it laid out, they've actually got, individual streets laid out, lots assigned, that kind of thing, in such detail that when we were driving up there, it's plotted out on like the GIS system. So as we're driving along, we're like, okay, we're here on this road, looking at that lot right here, that kind of thing. And this road, if you can see here, these houses will be here, and then the next road below, those houses will be here, and that's where the retaining will be, and that's why it's here. It was so informative and so detailed to see all that. It was really, 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 cool. I haven't seen anything like that before. What I think is also different is the amount of detail that is involved in how this is laid out is
we've never seen anything like this. We've never gotten a presentation like this as a council to see. At least on this scale, I mean, there's 1,100 acres and it's laid out. It's all on there. And I think that it makes it so much easier for us to understand what it is that we're saying yes to and why we would be saying yes and what it actually looks like moving forward. My strong recommendation would be to, go ahead and keep moving forward with it, putting it together. But that, Jim made a suggestion earlier and I'm gonna I'll steal your thunder here. To ask members of the planning commission and city council to go out and do that tour that I did. To go out and go see what they're talking about, why the roads are laid out the way they are, what the topography is. I mean, you're looking up a little box canyon and why the lots would be laid out the way they are, that kind of thing. It's really, really, really insightful, and I think this is gonna be a pretty easy yes to support once you guys see all this. I think you'll be really, really pleased. There's so many wins in it across the board. Chase and I stood there talking, I'm like, wow, you guys did this and this and this and this and this, and it's like all the things that we've been begging for as a council, like please fix these things, they actually listened. So I'm really pleased about it, and I'm usually not this excited about development stuff happening, but this is pretty cool. I've never really gone out on a limb and championed any development plans of any kind. This is one to get excited about, guys, so, take the time to do the diligence, look at it, but I think you guys will be pretty excited. And hats off to Jim, he's carried a lot of water to make this happen and brought a lot of disparate people and disparate interests together to all support the same vision. And to have all those people agree to something that I think we can agree to as well, it's noteworthy, and I think it's worthy of acknowledgement and praise too, so.
For my 2 cents, Steve, this is a conversation we had yesterday, just to see it, might be the biggest skeptic of any of these things.
Yeah, I understand.
So I'm anxious to see it. We've been burned and burned and burned, and that's why I got involved with stuff, you guys all know that. But to me, the heavy lift is the MDAs and those things, so I'm interested to hear those details. Okay, listen, then what, the devil's always in the details, so I wanna see those things, the PID. We can regurgitate the previous discussions we've had about PIDs and the good and the bad and the ugly of them. That's kinda to me the easier part of this. It's gonna be the MDAs together, so I'm interested. To me, that's the biggest part.
It brings up an interesting concept too. The schedule I put together pushed the bids to the end, and if council wanted to, you'd come to an agreement with where the roads and water lines, the park, these improvements that I've listed here. If that's the general location where we feel good with them, we can move the bid forward earlier, and they could possibly get started. Or you wanna put the MDAs in the bid. Okay.
But
That's
if
what
you
I
look,
assumed.
all this grade hash mark stuff, that's not just not for show. That's it. I mean, that's it laid out. It's really, really detailed. I think you guys will be surprised at where it is. I mean, like the big hole in the middle, we're driving along the road going, yeah, this is where the school will be, and you can actually, touch it and see where it is.
That's why the MDA is important.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Alright, so yeah, that's the improvements.
I think you will too.
Changes the game.
I'm gonna be surprised when Jared comes back and goes, I was impressed, I was surprised.
He's seen lots of watercolors in the past.
I know, that's.
Finger.
Most of these items are typically things that we would hope and pray the impact fees and collect and cover the cost. We've had this discussion before. We looked at the cost, $50 million. The impact fees would only generate a fraction of that. So the developer would be left holding the bag, or the city would have to owe it somehow. We'd have to look at
Ultimately, the city.
CDA. So it's always a struggle. So this PID makes some pretty good sense financially in infrastructure terms here on that side of it.
And
these are retaining walls.
It gets that key infrastructure in before any
To
development
me,
happens. We
the
have
PID
dual
is-
access in and out of the.
The PID's actually the easy part of this.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's the MDAs.
Just to hit this one a little harder, retaining walls along the roads, we never include those in our impact fee analysis. They're on this, so I mean, it's just a whole bunch more cost that we wouldn't have been collecting impact fees for. So, I might be missing a few roads in Wasatch here. They have a couple of extra roads. One addition since the last time you saw this was this little piece of road here. And if you look back at this plan, this is something I just received. I don't know if this is final yet, but I received it. There's some added commercial or non-residential uses down here, so flex space or some commercial along Mountain View. So they listened to you in the last joint meeting and added some things there. So that road was added in as a PID road. And then we have the park, of course, and the school in the center. And then this kind of shows the land ownership at the end of the day with the hatched areas, the DAI, the red is Rosecrest, and the blue Wasatch.
And we already have that access point from Boundary Corridor? Or is it-
Yes.
Okay.
There are a few more access points down through here that we'll need to look at. The cooperative agreement with UDOT identified key spots. Some of them are a little bit off, a little bit closer. All that'll have to be approved through UDOT, but that one lines pretty much right up with where we already have one shown. That was what I had. We have about 7 more minutes, so are there any questions on any of the other items? The Wasatch MBA was discussed, when was that?
At the
End of March.
joint meeting.
Or end of May joint meeting. And, man, I had everything really organized. I fell apart. But it had a list of things that we have been working with them. We have a every other week meeting with Wasatch. And we've been working through a lot of those items. I haven't gotten them all resolved yet, but we're getting there. But that one should be coming back, and then that has to go to planning commission. So all the MDAs, of course, my anticipation is we'll take those through city council, a couple meetings. Interestingly, we have like 3 joint meeting opportunities for now in March. So they fall off, and it seems like. So there'll be a couple of more opportunities to maybe bring these joint meetings in the future. To kind of expedite that planning commission process. I think that'll help. Sometimes planning commission can take us down a different path, and we have to come back and do it back and forth. So if we have everybody together, that'll help that. I feel like the Wasatch one, like I said, will be able to move forward a little bit more quickly, and then we'll keep working with the electricity to get all that tied together.
Would it be possible to get that planning commission council joint session tour sooner than later? Cause Craig and I have been working, and there's some horse trading that needs to happen to make that commercial happen, and with ownership, because we didn't just follow property boundaries. We let the topo kind of dictate the plan, and I've coordinated with like 18 different landowners literally over the last 2.5 years to put all this together. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and working with Justin and trying to help get water lines tied in with the system. So if we could get that meeting sooner than later, so I can show you guys on site, you can see the vision. It's way different to see it on paper.
I don't know that
versus-
you're gonna get both of those bodies on site all at the same time, but
Are we gonna
contact us all
be doing two
individually.
different shifts? Yeah.
However you guys wanna do it.
I think you're gonna take them out individually or in groups of 2, and then the joint meeting would be really talk about what language needs to be in
Oh,
there.
that works.
So-
We do a joint meeting here if there's a fifth.
Okay.
We have one in November, and we have one in January.
And we can see if where we get to that, cause there's some other language that I've talked with Todd that we need to make sure gets included in any amendment due to some state statute changes, so.
So,
There's still some hurdles to talk about because we're gonna be talking about some of the water stuff you're talking about and not to jump ahead, but some of that discussion would impact fees cover some of those, the delta and costs that they're talking about, right? And if there's PIDs, those impact fees for that isn't gonna be collected, so it's gotta figure out how do we cover those costs, right? So there's still some things to be tied up and some agreements to be made here, but it's not, I don't think we're far away, but we still have to dot those i's and cross those t's, so.
Well, we have some grading dollars, for instance, in that PID that would help offset some of the costs, and I've been working pretty close with Justin on trying to figure out how to make all that
And
happen.
a lot of the water lines that are included in the PID are some of the ones that are included in that.
Good, okay, and we were talking about where that tank would be, in that one part, yeah. How you guys are great over there to make it easier for the installation and the fence line and everything, yeah.
And to that end, what you've seen here that Blake has presented is really limited to what we think we need, but that doesn't involve a more thorough discussion with the city of,
What the city needs
is
above and
there
beyond that.
some need that you need above and beyond what we've identified that can be wrapped into the PID, like these water lines, to facilitate some of the master plans that the city's anticipating?
Got it.
Can you do the landscaping along?
Juniper grass?
As long as it's in the public right of way.
So there were three items that I
It is,
identified.
it is.
Actually, 4 items I identified in the review of the governing document that I think might be a little lacking or might need more information. One of them is the detailed infrastructure cost breakdown. For Wasatch, it was a little bit lacking. DAI was pretty detailed.
Yeah, we were a little bit more 30,000 foot view until we kind of had the ability to sort of drill down on it a little bit more, which we got that information, we're happy to provide it.
Sherry says she wants a 10,000.
Right, we might go down to one.
Bring it in for a meeting.
The infrastructure O&M cost is a requirement, and I didn't see that included anywhere, so we'll need to break, and we might need to work with Justin quite a bit to get, and Monty, to figure out costs for O&M on roads and water lines and things. It's just an ongoing requirement in the governing document, in policy. One thing that wasn't provided, another thing I guess, is the analysis and comparison of proposed mill levies and mill levies from other taxing entities affecting that property. So I think there's just an analysis of what a typical tax breakdown would be for a lot for school district, county. Everybody kind of put together just to show, there's a statement that says it's gonna be $1,485 more, but maybe just a breakdown to show where all the other money, what the rest.
So this is out of our PID policy.
This is straight out of the policy. And the last one is 3 years of proposed operating budgets. And I didn't see that included in here, so. And get everybody a list of that, and, I don't know, that was just for the council's knowledge there. And I don't know if anyone, read that, but as you go back and look through this, summary, and you have the PID policy and the governing document, now you have the LOI, you kind of look at it, if you see anything else that needs to be done. I'll keep working with the developers to get all that information in, bring it back.
One quick thing I wanted to bring up, in terms of timing, right now, of course, we're going in jointly with DAI for this PID money. But if a situation arises where the approval of their MDA takes longer than, say, we expected it to do, and we're in a position where we can start putting in infrastructure immediately, we had talked about potentially bifurcating the two PIDs and making them two different ones, just from a timing perspective. Is there any issue with that? It would still be pretty much the same. It would do same money, same effect, overall effect,
Yeah,
just two different timelines.
I mean, I can't speak for it, but I think we've gotten over our hurdles about PIDs generally speaking. And I don't, if that land is just not included in yours and it's included
Sure.
in yours, it's the same amount of money on the
Just
same
wanted to,
property.
just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
that
to
that
me,
got
it's the
brought
same,
up.
no,
To me,
I mean,
there's-
you have 6 little kids in there anyway, you're
Yeah.
dividing that out at some point anyway, so.
There's a couple fine points, but open to that if it comes to that.
Okay. Get
Juniper
crest in and finish that landscape.
Jeez, that'd solve a whole lot of problems, yeah. God,
Phase one, Mayor, phase one.
That's
I met with
that's
Jeff
a
Wright today.
800-pound gorilla on our back here, so.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
you good, Blake?
Thanks, yes.
Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate y'all being here. Okay, I'll look for a motion to go in, we've just got consent, so we'll be 30 seconds. We've got CDA and we've got two others, there's names, but they're both consent.
That's you when they tell
Okay.
you.
I'll make a motion, that's the general session.
Oh, there's a public hearing, sorry.
No, I've been
All in
on
favor?
that.